Once you have it out of the bag, it takes 2 people to open it up. You grab that side and spread it out. You're not going to raise it all the way. You don't want the centers to raise up, so that way you can put the top on. So now we're going to put the top on. You have to pay particular attention to where you place these because it has reinforced top that goes on those poles that extend up once we raise it up. So,
take it your way.
line everything up how it's supposed to be. Put the corners on. As you can tell, it's got little pockets. Pockets go right on the corner. Do all 4 corners. Now we'll walk it out and stand it up.
Stop. Good.
Okay. Just grab the bottom bar, and all we're going to do is walk backwards until it clicks in place. Now you're just making sure all your corners are on correctly. Like so. And there is Velcro on the inside that attaches it to the pole so it don't move. Also little clips. That clips it to the underbelly. Right here. There's clips periodically through the whole tent. Next, you're going to raise it 1 click up so you can have free range to walk underneath it to plumb it. So we're just going to raise up 1 click. Do all 4 legs. And we'll secure the top. If it's a windy day, you definitely want this done or it's going to blow everywhere.
We'll do this side.
So now it's a matter of plumbing it with the misting heads. Okay, so now we got everything out of the box, all the contents, and it should include your pump, your tubing, your unions, the cutters, and then also a 12-volt pump. I'm going to go over the pump first as far as your connections. Of course, you got one that runs straight to the water hose. And then it doesn't matter if you're running off hose pressure or if we tie in with the 12-volt pump, it still feed through here and then it'll feed your system. Once we get everything assembled as far as on the tubing, your connection's right here on the end. And that's what feeds to your misting nozzles. It has a filter, and I'll come back to that here in just a second. Here's your tubing. It's pretty simple to put together. You just start it out from the pump and work your way, and wherever you want to place a nozzle, you would cut it. This is what you would call a union. You would slide the union over the end of the tube where you're wanting to place it, and then you would stick the tube on the other side and run it to your next union. These are your cutters. This is how you cut the tubing. It's just a matter of sticking those on there and rotating it around until it cuts through the tubing. These are your nozzles that you would place into your unions right here. You just screw them in. Excuse me. And this is your 12-volt pump. So you don't have to feed off of water pressure. It can come from like a buffalo tank, and you can hook this up, which would feed this to the missing station. So you have a bag of several of the unions, bag of nozzles, and then several 90s for your turns. All right, so we covered all the pieces to it. We're going to come back to the pump. This pump's designed with a filter, so we can keep all the trash coming through the pump. You just unscrew it. This goes in, and then you screw it back on. It's imperative that you change the filter out after 12 to 18 hours. We keep several on hand so we can swap it out. And then your power supply here is your 110 for your pump. So now we're going to demonstrate how you would actually tie all this stuff together and attach it to your missing station tent. Now we're going to set up the pump, get it in position, and you want to leave it a little ways away from the actual tent so we can have room to maneuver it around. So if y'all would bring the pump over here. We're going to place it somewhere in that neighborhood. Spin it around so the tubing part comes this direction. Something like that. And then it's a matter of hooking up the tubing, and then we're going to start threading it through our tent. Prior to starting to thread on the tubing part right here, you want to leave you at least a good coil on the ground. That way it gives you room to move the pump from a little bit from one side to the other. And then we'll start the plumbing process of this. It'll start from here, come up here, put a 90, you can give me one of 90 degrees. So from the pump, with an extra roll of coil right here for maneuverability, and then you're going to place a 90, so we'd actually have to cut it. And then we'll place a 90 so it comes up like that. And then we'll continue up here. You got to leave enough down here because this is actually you can raise this tent quite a bit higher. So it depends on how high you want to place the tent. You don't want to run out of extra tubing down here. So at that point we're going to start assembling this. First off, how we would like to do it is we're going to get our spacing or how much we need here, start to run up here. We use zip ties to attach it to the tent. We're going to run our tubing, and then we'll start seeing where we want to place our nozzles, and we'll start the cutting process and tying it in together from that point on. All right, so now we're going to walk and place the tubing up in position on the tent. Notice how I left a big coil here on the ground, and then we're going to use one zip tie to zip tie it to the post. If you want to zip tie it down there. And then we're going to start the process of walking it up the tent. Now I know you have corners in the bag, but you don't necessarily have to use the 90-degree corners. We're going to mold and fold, however you want to classify that. And we just secure it all down with zip ties. There. Leave us a little slack so we can. Make sure you leave a little bit of slack so you have room to do the cutting and.
Go back later and tighten up this side. Where you put your zip ties and how many you use, you don't really need a whole lot of them now. There's going to be some sagging. You're going to leave yourself a lot of flexibility because later on you can go back and judge where you need extras to kind of bring up the sagging and so as not to get in the way of your nozzles that you're going to place later. So, like Jerry said, give yourself a lot of flexibility.
Well, I'm just doing it so I can go around the corner. All right, we got the tubing ran, and if you notice, it's at serpentine, so it goes down one edge, then you go over to the center braces, come down, then you go to the center of the tent, back down, back over to the center ways on the other side, come back up, and then we're ending at the other corner. Due to the size, one roll of tubing fitted one tent, so you have to make a decision whether you're going to use multiple tents or one tent. So if you decide to use one tent, then at that point you can cut it off and end the section there. If you decide to go to two tents, then you have to put a union in and then start threading it to your other tent that's popped up. So with that, we're probably going to simulate that it's on the one tent. To determine how many nozzles you're going to use, you need to kind of see how many you have in your bag, whether you're doing one tent or two tent. Find the areas that you're wanting to place them, and like I said, one tent, it's easy calculation. If you're using two tents, you got to times that by 2 as long as you have enough nozzles. I'm going to speak about the nozzles real quick, or the unions. They're designed whenever you push the tubes in, when you put the plumbing in it, you should be able to maneuver these back out if you can, but it's a high pressure pump, so whenever it pressurizes, it usually sinks it in there and lets the teeth grab into the plastic and you're not able to remove them. So once one of these are in place, you can almost assure that they're there to stay. They're not there to come out. So make sure you have them in the right location if that's where you want them before you place it. So here we're going to assume that we're going to put 7 nozzles down each, and there's actually 5 strands, so 7 times 5 is 35, so we need 35 nozzles. So it's just a matter of placing one here. We're going to place another one just at all the little joints along the tent, and then we're going to backtrack down this side. The centers take a little less because there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 of them in the center, so not quite 35 unions. So with that, we're going to show you how to attach one of these unions. So I need a cutter. In your box, you should have had 2 cutters. So we're actually going to, this is your cutter. You want to hold that for a second?
Yes, I will.
Just a matter of grabbing that, and then you spin it. Come on. Cutting.
Yeah. While Jerry's cutting it, while you do cut them, try to get as straight as cut as possible, because if you get it cut at an angle, sometimes it won't bite into the union quite as good, you know, and when you pressurize the system, you might have one pop loose, so you might have to go recut it. So try to get it straight.
And then the whole idea is, remember, where the nozzle hole is, you want that spraying down or just a little bit to the inside. So placement of those are pretty critical. It's just a matter of pushing it in and then tie your other side in. So that one's there. Now you can insert the nozzle.
Those little nozzles have a little rubber O-ring gasket in there, so they don't need to be like wrench tight. Just finger tight is as tight as it can get. So
now you have a nozzle pointed down to spray out. So now it's just wherever you have marked that you're going to place a nozzle, you just start cutting the tubing. Like I said, try to cut a good straight line. Cut it, place the union, add the nozzle. And then whenever you're at the termination site of your tubing, you got to have an end cap. You have an end cap that also goes inside one of the unions. See how it's blanked off on the side? Then you just put that in your last union and that stops the water. So just like that. You push it in there. You can still put a nozzle at the termination end where it still sprays at the very end, but no more, you don't have any other feeding on the outside. So the main idea on this is the placement of your nozzles, and make sure you have those spraying down or maybe at a little bit of an angle so it provides the mist at a greater distance, versus if you spray it up, it's just going to hit that and it's going to come to solid droplets back down. So you want it to spray out. So once you start placing your nozzles, so we cut this one, now you need to pull it to your desired location for that. Then you need to zip tie tight so it stays there. That way as we walk down this, your nozzles are in their correct place and there's less likely for it to close the gap and you misplace a nozzle. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this one down. There you go. And then that way as you're walking this out, you can pull it tight. We'll cut our next one, place the nozzle, and just keep working it. That way it stays tight all the way until you're completely done. It's important that you mark the leg that your pump's going to be sitting on. So since we have the pump sit here, this will be the leg that the pump sits by. That way it's set up the same every time. And it makes your rollout or the setup a lot easier. That way you're not falling out where's the pump goes. So put it in the same location, mark it with tape or however you want to mark it, saying this is the pump leg, and then you can easily roll out the misting station from there. It takes a little bit of practice when you first put them up to get good at it, or set it up pretty easy. So having easy marks would be beneficial. That way everybody sets it up the same way. So now that we have all of our nozzles hooked up, now I'm going to show you how to hook it up into the pump. This is a ferruled fitting, so all you need to do is unscrew the nut here. Take the end of your line there, place it on, and it's just screwing it back in. And you really don't have to wrench it on. It can be finger tight. If it leaks, then you might have to tighten up a little bit further. But now, other than a water source, we're ready to pump. It's very important if you're utilizing this pump itself, with not the little 12 volt, but if you're using this pump, this needs to be manned the whole time it's in operation. Because if water supply gets shut off, you burn the pump up. And it don't take a whole lot of time for it to burn the pump up. So this should be manned or monitored the entire time it's in use. So now it's just hook this to your water supply, whether it's the hose or we'll connect it to the 12 volt pump, and it's a matter of spraying it or starting it up and utilizing the misting station. We're ready to go. You need to put the vented cap on it so the pump's able to get a little bit of air. Use a crescent wrench to take the black one out. Just spin that out. And then the one that was packaged on the side of your pump right here, take it out of the bag and use finger tight. It's got an O-ring connection. Just screw that in. And it's ready to go. So now we're hooked up for city water, but if you're in an area where you have to use a water buffalo or a tanked water supply, then we have a little bit different way to hook it up. You got a 12 volt pump that runs on 110. you'll make the connections. If you pay attention to the pump, it tells you where your water inlet goes. And you would have, these fittings are the same as what these black fittings are. And you would run one to the tank, and then you'd have to run another one. This, with the fitting that's not supplied yet, but it's future to come, will run from here to the water hose for water purposes. And then it'll be a priming pump. So, like I said, you have to have a 110 plug for it, and you just connect it, and then it's ready. It's a priming pump for this pump, and then you'd use the missing station as used from a tanked source. All right, once everything's together, you know, and we're operational, it's very important that you only use potable water. That's what it's designed, and if you use anything other than that, then any future use of this is pretty much void. You're not supposed to use anything other than potable water. With that, you need potable water lines, which is the white with blue stripe on it. This is kind of what they look like. I believe they are being ordered. And then from this point on, it's the showing you how we store everything, so to transport it. With the hoses, I'll go ahead and do it now. You roll it up or coil it up, and we always hook them back together. That way nothing gets on the inside of the line. And then about to go pull the rest of the stuff over here. This is a finished product of all the nozzles inside the tubing that stretches around our tents. So this fits our old tent, and we're going to work on the new one. All right. And then I need the black box. Oh, it's already got a pump in. Let's just leave that whole thing on.
Are they getting Pelican cases?
Y'all getting Pelican cases? Yeah, they're in. So once we're done, we place everything back inside of a Pelican case, and it helps protect it from maneuvering around. So pump goes in first, and then we lay the filters, zip ties, hammer, crescent wrench, all that goes inside. Then we'll put the water hoses on top of it. Now the tubing with the nozzles in it will not fit in here, so you just have to find a place to store those without them getting any damage to them. So just lay the water hoses in there. Now you secure the top. Was it? And it's secured. Another thing we utilize is our fans. It helps just disperse the misting on a greater distance. So what we like to do is we set our fans up on one end, plug them up, and get them blowing across. That way, as these misting nozzles, as it settles down, usually it'll be just straight down to the ground. These will help push it out, and you can actually get a lot of distance outside the tent with the air movement of the water. So we utilize our fans to actually push across this, and it gets a bigger area misting, and it works really well.
And then once you get everything set, then you can come back over and twist it where it needs to be. All right, you got it. Thanks.
It don't have to be overly tight, but you want it snug. It's got an O-ring, and it broke. Crap. I barely even put anything on it.
Yeah.
Don't do that.